Despite Canada's image as a welcoming and humanitarian country, newcomers face individual and structural racism. In this video, we will discuss how race is directly implicated in forced migration and what needs to happen in research and policy to better address racism. How is race related to migration? According to Lenton, 2020, page 5, race is, quote, a technology for the management of human difference, unquote. It serves to maintain white supremacy through exclusion and subordination, and as a system of power that interlocks with class, gender, sexuality, ability, state, and nation. Racial persecution is the reason why many people flee their countries and is a legal basis for asylum claims. Race is also at the core of refugees' experiences because of being portrayed as unwelcomed intruders, threats, or economic burdens. Most significantly, forced migration is managed through an inherently racially determined international order that continues to privilege whiteness. For example, research on the founding of the 1951 UN Refugee Convention shows that the refugee rights regime favored Europeans from the start. Racism in Canada. Canada's immigration governance as a settler state reveals several blatant examples of historical and contemporary racism. Using the example of the head tax on Chinese immigrants, Taylor, 1991, reminds us that from 1885 until the 1970s, the law, quote, was explicitly racist in wording and intent. Non-white, non-European immigration was openly discouraged and/or prohibited, unquote, page 2. In addition, we see historical examples where whiteness is conflated with Christianity. As Mahrouse, 1985, points out, although there were no laws prohibiting the immigration of Jews, quote, discrimination was incontestable, unquote, page 9. This enabled Canadian immigration authorities to refuse entry of Jewish people who were fleeing Nazi persecution, the Holocaust, and the aftermath of the Holocaust. Research also demonstrates that in Canada, racism continues to manifest through structures, institutions, policies, and practices. For example, visible minority migrants, newcomers, and refugees state that they are treated less favorably by teachers, health service providers, border officials, police, and at government offices. In schools, children, adolescents, and their families experience institutional racism via social segregation, curriculum content, pedagogical approaches, and discipline procedures. Structural racism means there are several gaps in healthcare access among racialized migrants. These include limited health insurance eligibility, concerns about negative immigration consequences, for example, medical repatriation, requirement to present proof of status at point of care, and scarce culturally and linguistically appropriate care. Gaps and promising practices in forced migration studies and policies. Despite its significance to forced migration, race is largely overlooked or inadequately addressed in forced migration. For example, Whiteley, 2017, shows that critical border studies does not articulate a theory of racism or work from a history of racism. Race is also overlooked in many mainstream analyses of forced migration. However, there are some emerging good practices. By making evident that race is an essential starting point for understanding refugees and forced migration, critical refugee studies scholars offer paradigm-changing anti-racist methodological and theoretical frameworks. Organizations working with refugees have also exposed the underlying links between forced migration and racism. For example, in 2015, Amnesty International proposed, quote, stopping racism, unquote, as one of the solutions for addressing root causes of forced migration. Conclusions and recommendations. To address these gaps in research and policy, researchers and practitioners need to expand knowledge on race and forced migration by engaging with Black and Indigenous knowledges. Similarly, organizations serving refugees should follow the example of Amnesty International, the UN Refugee Agency, and others in explicitly committing to anti-racism and identifying and exposing individual and structural racism.